In 2021, Amazon Studios released the first season of their adaptation of The Wheel of Time to mixed reception among people who are and are not familiar with the series. According to Rotten Tomatoes, 82% of critics and 62% of the audience enjoyed the show. It has a 3.2-star rating on Amazon, and many of the reviews cite this idea that it's a new turning of the Wheel of Time, not the one we witness in the books. The Wheel of Time Season 1 is a waste of potential. The cast is spectacular. Their performances are great. The sound design is absolutely beautiful. The show itself looks really good. There are a lot of highlights to be seen, and I will reference them throughout this video. These highlights are outshined by weird writing decisions that I don't particularly like. On its own, The Wheel of Time Season 1 is a boring slog of confusion held up by mystery and contrivance. As an adaptation of the Wheel of Time books, it makes no sense. Even if I view it as a different turning of the wheels, a lot of the decisions made, especially in the second half of the show, make it a poor retelling of the story. Conflict is erased, and melodrama is inserted for its own sake. As a whole, I did not like The Wheel of Prime's first season, and this video will be an explanation of the minor and major issues with good qualities highlighted. I will be spoiling the show and the books throughout this video, so if that bothers you, this is your time to leave. With that out of the way, let's begin. Episode 1 begins with an opening monologue that introduces us to a world broken by a man called the Dragon, leaving the women of the Aes Sedai to pick up the pieces. He has been born again and come of age, and must be found as soon as possible, but no one knows the form he takes. He might even be a she. This sets up a really good hook for people that aren't familiar with the source material. They won't know who the dragon is, and they'll be watching every moment of this show trying to figure out which character on the screen at any given point in time might be the dragon reborn. Meanwhile, people who are familiar with the show will be watching these false leads, trying to see how the show is trying to misdirect people, all while knowing who the dragon reborn actually is. So it can be done well. It just depends on execution. And we'll see how this goes throughout the rest of the series. The monologue ends, and we cut to two men running away from red clad women on horseback. The women use magic to block off the men's escape, and it's revealed that one of the men is the other's hallucination. A woman gets off of her horse and tells the man that this power isn't for him, and that when men touch it, they make it filthy. This comment bothered me because men are not the creators of the Dark One's taint on Sidene, the male half of the true source. They are victims of it. And it doesn't affect women at all because they can only channel Sidar, the female half of the true source. The only part of this sequence that makes any sense is the fact that this magic woman, this Aes Sedai, is of the Red Aja, and they are known misandrists. But if you're not familiar with the source material, you wouldn't know this. From here, we're introduced to Emmonsfield and the Two Rivers. We start with a coming of age ritual in which a girl named Egwene is tossed into a river by a woman named Nynaeve. This interpretation of a local tradition in the Two Rivers, where upon coming of age, women braid their hair, is a interesting interpretation of something so simple. Not bad, just interesting. We are then introduced to Rand and Tam Althor as they chat on their way from their farm to the village inn, and something rustles in the trees, causing rocks to fall, and Rand readies his bow. It's a false alarm, and the two of them continue on their journey. The show transitions to Emmons Field and the Wine Spring Inn, where we are introduced to Math Cawthon, who has been changed from a young prankster to a down on his luck gambler, and Perrin Abara, a blacksmith apprentice who is now a married blacksmith. The three of them discuss recent rumors as Matt eyes a bracelet on some woman. Egwene enters the inn to everyone's applause. A celebration begins that lasts into the night, and a storm is not enough to disturb the reverie. However, the arrival of a strange hooded man is. His name is Lanman Dragarin, and he is with Moraine, who immediately reveals herself to be an Aes Sedai, causing a stir as everyone watched her get led to her room. Perrin then leaves to go talk to his wife Layla, who is working a forge. The decision to give Perrin Aybara a wife in this show is an odd one. She's not a character from the books, meaning that people who have read the series won't really have an emotional connection to her, and we don't really establish much about her here other than her being Perrin's wife. Matt steps out and bumps into his mom, revealing that someone somewhere decided to take the Cawthon family from the book and just break it. They are now impoverished. Matt's mother, Natty, who was a collected and calm woman, is now a mentally unstable hysteric. Abel Cawthon, a successful and well respected horse trader, is now an alcoholic that cheats on her. At the inn, Rand and Egwene start getting intimate because that's what I needed in my adaptation of the first Wheel of Time book was more sex to be more mature, that's what I needed. But don't worry, before things get too hot, we cut to Moraine in a cloudy bathtub and see Landsbutt. He sits down in the tub and says it's clear that Moraine thinks one of the villagers is the dragon and asks which one it is. It cuts to Egwene with less clothes, implying that it might be her. And Rand enters the scene without his shirt on. They talk. Then we cut to a strange white creature with a black hood on horseback. It stops in the middle of a village, just sitting there, menacingly. Riveting. We transition to a peddler who is welcomed by the villagers. Egwene talks to her father. Layla wakes up and stares at Perrin for a little bit, then falls back to sleep herself. Clearly, a deep, complex, and important character. I would be devastated if she died in this episode. Matt gives a stolen bracelet to the peddler we saw earlier. His name's Padden Fane. And Padden Fane exchanges the bracelet for 3 lanterns. Then we see Moraine and Lan walking and talking around the village. Moraine says that one of the Eyeless might be here. And then it cuts to Rand and Egwene talking on a cliffside about how they can't get married because Nynaeve wants to train Egwene to become a wisdom. And then Moraine talks to Nynaeve about how she's not actually from the Two Rivers. And then Matt, Rand, and Perrin share a round of drinks. And then Egwene and Nynaeve stand on a bridge and say that something feels wrong in the air. Then Lan finds several sheep brutally slaughtered in the middle of the forest. And then Moraine is staring out the window at the inn, watching Matt, Rand, and Perrin as they share drinks. And then they talk because Perrin and Rand have coins for Matt so he can buy the lanterns he already has, but he refuses and Perrin insists. And then Rand goes home. And then his father talks about the ritual of the lantern and how it guides spirits back to where they came from. And then he brings up the idea of the Wheel of Time and how it turns forever, weaving a pattern using people's lives as threads. That was actually kind of interesting. The sun sets as Moraine and Lan watch the villagers send the lanterns upriver. We cut to the people of Emmonsfield gathering in the village square to sing and dance. Then we cut back to Moraine and Lan again as Lan says there's Trollocs in the area. They need to leave, and it's urgent, but Moraine still doesn't know who the dragon is. We cut back to the happy villagers dancing and singing and smiling, then one of them gets an axe thrown through them. A horned beast half again as large as any human emerges. Then more of them emerge, attacking anyone and everyone they see. Our main cast is separated. Nynaeve and Egwene are outside trying to stay safe, helping whoever they can, despite how futile it seems. Perrin and Layla hold down their forge, attempting to protect other villagers inside. Matt finds safety, but immediately rushes back out into danger when he learns his sisters are still out there with the Trollocs. And Rand is still with his father at their house. A Trolloc bursts through their door and tosses the 2 of them around like ragdolls. Tam grabs his heron-marked blade, which he uses to duel with the Trolloc for a moment. While clearly skilled and able to land several cuts on the beast, he is eventually overpowered and pinned to the wall. The beast is able to get its blade to slice into his flesh, but has ignored Rand, who uses this moment to ram a fire iron into his throat. While the immediate danger is over, the Trollocs blade has poisoned Tam in some way. The cut shouldn't be fatal, but he's weakening swiftly. He tells Rand to go, but Rand says he's going to get him to Nynaeve. So we cut to Nynaeve, and we get this very grown up and mature moment in this very grown up and mature show for adults. Thankfully, Moraine and Lan show up to save the day, using magic and battle prowess to kill the Trollocs. Meanwhile, several villagers surround a Trolloc and manage to kill it. Another Trolloc makes it into Perrin and Layla's forge. He tells Layla to run as he arms himself with an axe, but she stays behind to help him fight as more beasts enter the forge. Matt finds his sisters and helps them find hiding spots, and then Moraine continues to use her power, this time calling down lightning from the sky. Nynaeve is just suddenly dragged away by a Trolloc. Then Perrin has embers thrown in his face and is pushed down by a Trolloc, while Layla uses a hammer to crush one's leg and skull. Then Perrin gets up, taking down the Trolloc that was attacking him, and uses his axe and goes crazy, begins chopping into it after it's on the ground like a savage beast, like a dragon maybe. And then he swings the axe behind him into Layla, who was holding a hammer over her head. She dies, convulsing and coughing up blood. Moraine is injured by a Trolloc's knife before using the last of her strength to throw bricks from the inn at the final horde of Trollocs. The dust clears and we see the morning after as Rand brings Tam before Moraine. She gives him the healing he needs. Matt returns his sisters to their parents, and then Perrin sets his wife's body down, blaming it on the Trollocs instead of himself. Rand, Matt, and Perrin and Egwene confront Moraine, and Rand blames her for the Trollocs, and she says one of them is the dragon. A person so powerful, they alone can fight Shaitan at the last battles. The characters are so nonplussed to this. The only reaction that any of them gives is Matt deadpanningly telling her that she's probably crazy. But they don't have time to argue because there's more Trollocs coming, and if they stay, Moraine says their village will be attacked. So they leave with her, and she gives a closing monologue.
The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend.
There are several things to point out about this episode. If you actually watch it, I feel like you'll understand what I mean when I say it's pretty boring. Then there's the fact that we don't see Tam talking to Rand while he's hallucinating through the effect of the Trolloc poisoning. And then we also don't really get to learn much about Layla. You know, you made this brand new character to be Perrin's wife, and we don't really know anything about her other than she was strong and Perrin's wife and a blacksmith, and he loved her. Such a deep character, and I'm so devastated that she's dead now. I hope we don't treat her like she's in a fridge and we pull out her corpse every once in a while to show to Perrin. This episode is about as middle of the road as you can get. It's not terrible, but it's not great, and it raises enough questions that I can see some people being interested enough to follow the show and find answers. The second episode begins with a cold open introducing us to the Children of the Light, a force to be reckoned with. The sequence follows Eminvalda, a character first introduced in Book 6 of The Wheel of Time, as he is presented with a Captain Crunch cereal bar in celebration of a victory that we did not see. The dish has brutality to it. The flavor doesn't come merely from the copious amounts of sugar within. The roughness of the shapes cut the inside of your mouth, and it's not enough that it hurts, it's just enough to make you bleed. He has prepared an Aes Sedai woman to be burned at the stake, cut off her hands to prevent channeling, and collects her ring to add to his large collection. As he burns her alive, he takes a drink from a silver chalice and accidentally smears blood from his lip onto it. The scene is really good. I liked it. I felt that it did a great job of establishing the Children of the Light, and it got me really excited for the rest of this episode. We cut back to our main cast fleeing the Trollocs. They reach the Tarn ferry and pay the ferryman to give them passage. Once on the other side, Moraine uses her power to sink his vessel, and the ferryman says, "But my son!" and jumps into the water with the sinking ship. While Moraine could use the one power to help him, she doesn't. This causes the Emmons fielders to mistrust her because we needed to sow that mistrust by assassinating Moraine's character. That night, Moraine tells Egwene that she has the ability to channel, and Rand falls asleep away from the rest of the group. He has a nightmare where he coughs up a dead bat and sees a strange man with embers for eyes. He wakes up to find many dead bats surrounding him and learns that everyone else had a similar dream. He suggests that Moraine put the bats in their dreams, but she presses them on the details of the dream. Then Rand yells at her, asking why the group should trust her, a sequence that might have more weight to it had they built up the tension. Having Rand ask the same questions with the actual shouting saved for the final, why should they trust you? It would have been a little better that way, I think. The group continues up the road and they encounter the white cloaks we saw earlier. One of them asks a few questions before sending them on their way, but then Valda comes up behind him like a prick and just starts rattling his Aes Sedai rings. Just rattle, rattle, rattle. It's revealed that Valda holds the rank of questioner and wants to interrogate our friends further. Moraine uses her words carefully to get around the fact that she's bound by a magical oath to tell the truth, and at the same time, the White Cloaks don't simply ask her to speak a word that is untrue. In this moment, the White Cloaks just come off as cartoonishly villainous, and I really don't feel like they're much of a threat anymore. They just aren't going to be. I can predict this right now. Nothing serious will come of any future encounter with the White Cloaks in this season. Our heroes are allowed to continue on their journey and they sing the Song of Manetheren. They sing it well, and the song is really good. I just think it would feel more organic if Perrin was singing along with the rest of the group instead of doing a bass lead. Still very nice, though. Moraine then tells the story of Manetheren and how the ancient people of the land known as the Two Rivers held strong against the Dark One's forces as they waited for promised reinforcements. They stood strong for 3 days, and help never came, and they knew it would not. They lasted 10 more days, and their queen felt the death of her husband. In her anguish, she gathered enough of the One Power to destroy the Dark One's army, in a fire so powerful it burned her from the inside out as well. They set up camp for another night, and Perrin runs into some wolves. One of them approaches him and licks a wound on his leg, and it's a bit of decent foreshadowing of his future, regardless of the viewer's familiarity with the source material. Moraine's wound has incapacitated her, and in the middle of the night, the Shadow Spawn catch up to our heroes. Lan leads everyone to the city of Shadar Logoth, an empty place enshrouded by a deafening silence. They set up camp in one of the buildings, and we learn that Shadar Logoth is just a city from which evil grew out of, because the idea of a place being eaten from the inside out by greed and paranoia was too complex for this show. Lan tells everyone not to touch anything and to eat only what they brought. Rand steps out to explore, and Egwene follows him so they can hold hands in silence. Get a nice panning shot of the city before cutting to Matt and Perrin. Matt hands him a knife that Layla made. Perrin stares at it tearfully before thanking him and reassuring Matt that his sisters are going to be fine. This moment proves my concerns about Perrin having a wife at the beginning of the story were correct. We're supposed to care that Layla made this, but we don't know anything about her, other than she was his wife. Now her dead soul is being dug out of the fridge. We're waving it in front of the parent in the audience so that we know he loved her. And it's so sad she's gone. Aren't you so sad? Time passes and we find our cast sleeping on the floor beside a small fire. Matt wakes up and the light of the moon leads him to an ornate box containing a dagger. It's sheathed in gold with a red ruby in its hilt. It's a strong change from the books where it's found after a strange shadowless man named Mordith leads Matt, Rand, and Perrin to a room full of treasure before being outed as something inhuman. As Matt examines the blade, a horse cries out as it is consumed by a strange blackness. This mysterious substance spreads across the ground of the city as Moraine wakes up and is horrified by the fact that they are in Shadar Logoth. She says that land has killed them all, while outside, the strange black stuff is separating our group into three. Moraine and Lan ride out of the city on horseback. Matt and Rand narrowly escape through a grate and ride away on a log. Perrin and Egwene are forced to jump into the waters outside the city and manage to swim to safety. The episode ends with Lan trying to tend to Moraine's wounds when Nynaeve appears, putting a blade to his throat and threatening to kill him if he doesn't take her to the others. In the books, Moraine gave Matt, Rand, and Perrin a silver mark from Tarvalin that she could use to keep track of them with. And the reason they split up is because, in addition to Marshadar, the strange black stuff that disintegrates every living thing it touches, they were chased off by Shadow Spawn. The Trollocs chase Moraine and Lan and Nynaeve out of the city. They chase Perrin and Egwene to a large body of water, and they chase Matt, Rand, and a character that hasn't been introduced yet onto a ship. In the show, the fact that they split up doesn't really make any sense. They could just circle the perimeter of Shadar Logoth at a distance that's safe from Marshadar. They could just continue on their way to Tarvalin and get back together along the road. I guess this is just being done because it happened in the books, and the reasons why they split up are just being ignored. Overall, I can only say that this episode's a little more engaging than the first, and that makes it a little better. It's not as middle of the road, but it's not great. I really feel like episode 3 is where the show starts to really flesh out. We start with an explanation of how Nynaeve came to arrive at the end of the last episode. She was able to flee from the Trolloc that kidnapped her while it was distracted. She kills it in a cave and steals its blade. She tracks down Lan and Moraine, and once we see her demand to know where the others are, Lan explains he doesn't know where they are, that the Dark One is coming for them, and Moraine has given all of her strength to keep them safe from him. Nynaeve asks why she left them then, and Lan takes responsibility for it. He tells her how dire Moraine's condition is and suggests that healing Moraine would be mutually beneficial. Nynaeve tries to kill him, but he knocks her out. This sequence is really well done. I really enjoyed it. I felt it was a great character moment for Lan, and overall, it is a strong highlight of the show. We cut to Rand shouting for Egwene and Perrin from a mountain as he walks with Matt. They stop for a moment to discuss their next move. They have a heartfelt conversation about home, and after some arguing, they decide that they're going to head up to the White Tower, and they head east. Egwene and Perrin are being assaulted by the wind and chased by wolves, so they find a place to take refuge and try to light a fire to scare off the beasts. Perrin uses Layla's knight on Flint and accidentally cuts his thumb while doing so. Egwene manages to use the one power to light a fire and is successful. Perrin notices and he cracks a joke about it, and they wonder if the others are alright. Nynaeve is tied to a tree while Lan tends to Moraine. He brings Nynaeve some water and asks if she's reconsidered his proposal. She has conditions, but Lan really isn't in a position to argue. She gathers the botanicals she needs in a place that I really want to take a walk through someday. Lan asks Nynaeve about her ability to track him, and she gives him a sarcastic reply. She mixes the medicine and gives some exposition about the Aes Sedai and their warders having a bond, and we get a close up of Moraine's injury. And it reminds me of that moment in The Raid where bullets removed from someone's gut. Nynaeve applies the medicine to her injury, and we leave the scene with the Aes Sedai taking very weak, raspy breaths. We cut to Perrin having a nightmare about Layla. Her corpse is lying by the forge, and her intestines have been spilled out as a wolf is eating her. She turns to Perrin with dead, haunting eyes, and he looks away only to see the mysterious figure from the last dream with eyes like embers and a mouth of fire. He's startled awake by Egwene, who is concerned about how close wolves are getting to them. They flee the area, but the wolves are on their tail. Egwene notices the wolves have stopped, but Perrin drags her along. He doesn't care. Matt and Rand then find themselves in a rough town being greeted by a caged man's corpse outside. They go to an inn. They ask the woman in charge if she's seen their friends. Her name's Donna, and she's not seen Perrin or Egwene, but there is a Glee man in town. His name's Tom Maryland, a scruffy, gray haired man with leather boots and a brown jacket that's been patched over in various colors on the inside. He picks up the guitar and sings a sad song. When the performance is over, he gets tips from the patrons. Someone bumps into Matt, stealing his coin pouch. Tom takes a seat at Matt and Rand's table after bumping into that man. The waitress then brings soup for them, and for some reason, they have to pay for Tom's ale. Rand chips in, but Matt can't find his pouch. Tom reveals that he has it now, and when Matt tries to reach for it, Tom backs away and says it's his now, a donation for the Gleeman and the price of a life lesson. I have no clue where this depressed Dante from Devil May Cry 5 cosplayer came from, but he's not Tom Maryland. He's not even a Gleeman. A Gleeman's a person that lifts people's spirits. He gets them to buy more drinks at the inn. In exchange, they give him free food, free drinks, a bed, and maybe at the end of the day, he gets some extra money. He might be able to get away with singing melancholy songs, but he'd have to package it differently for me to believe he's getting away with it. Listen to like any punk song, a country song, some folk music. It's something energetic that still tackles a depressing theme. Something I could believe the people in this place could sing along to. Something like, I don't know, Jack of the Shadows, a song from the books this show is based on. Just a thought. We watch Perrin and Egwene look at some wagon tracks before cutting back to Rand and Matt as they make arrangements to stay the night under a tarp. Donna says they can chop wood for her, and Rand gets to work immediately. But Matt walks off and manages to find work serving drinks for her. He gives sarcastic jabs to the customer, and he talks to Donna and lies saying he's from Baileron. She explains that she was born in Breen Spring and has accepted she will never leave, and says that maybe for Matt, it's a place to start anew, projecting her desires onto him in a moment I consider a very strong highlight of the show. The dialogue in this scene was really good, but there's something that bothers me about the fact that Donna gets more character development than Layla. There's something that just really rubs me the wrong way about that. We cut to Perrin and Egwene following the trail they saw earlier, and they eventually run into mysterious people in the fog that have very large dogs. They approach ominously, asking, "Do you know the song?" A younger member of the group named Aram gives them an introduction and invites them to join the caravan. It's a moment that's really awkward, and I'll just have to play it to you so you can feel for yourself how awkward the introduction is.
They don't know it, or they'd have answered. Your welcome warms our spirit as your fires warm the flesh, but we do not know the song. That's the important bit. Go on, say it.
In the books, there's a mentor character named Elias who has the same abilities as Perrin. He also knows of the customs of the Tuathawan, or the Tinkers they're often called. Not having him here shouldn't make this moment so weird. Perrin and Egwene are strangers to the traveling people. They would have introduced themselves a little bit more properly before asking about the song, and then probably having to explain it. The song is something philosophical. It's a concept that is perhaps unattainable. A thing that the traveling people will never find, but always search for. They greet you asking if you know the song, and leave you saying, "I will find the song," or another will find the song. But the song will be sung this year or in a year to come. As it once was, so shall it be again. World without end. We cut back to Rand continuing to chop wood. Donna says he can stop and offers him a drink. She says that he and Matt have earned a proper roof before the script causes her to tastelessly insinuate that they are gay and they're going to have loud gay butt sex. And I'm wondering, When did this show become Avenue Q?
You can count on me to always be beside you every day to tell you it's okay. You were just born that way, and as they say, it's in your DNA. You're gay. I am not gay. If you were gay.
We cut back to Moraine and Lan. Lan returns asking if Moraine can ride on horseback. Matt is over by the corpse in the cage, trying to grab a precious stone from it. Tom sneaks up on him and they have a standoff that ends with Tom saying he's here to bury the dead man. He tells Matt that he has two rivers written all over him in the way that he talks, but I don't really see anything unique about the Two Rivers accent or their manner of speaking. Tom then says it's also in the way that he dresses, which does stand out in this town, and it's also in Matt's attitude. So I guess 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Tom then explains that the dead man is an Aiel. They have uniquely red hair, like Rand. He says the townsfolk were bragging about killing the Aielman, and even though the man was not a threat to them, they murdered him, like cowards who feared something they didn't understand. The conversation shifts to what Matt's doing in the town. He says he needs money to get home, so Tom turns a blind eye to him taking things off the corpse. Alongside the stone, Matt obtains a small carving of a dog and apologizes to the body before helping Tom to bury him. And it's not a bad moment. It's decent. I really thought it worked well within this show. And we go back to the inn. Rand and Donna are having a conversation. She asks why Rand left Baleron, and he goes with Matt's cover story. She reads through his words and determines the two of them are escaping trouble. She asks why they're splitting up, asks where Rand's going. She then says she might be able to help and has a moment of longing, wanting to see the outside world. She lists off things that we'll likely see later, and I feel something of an emotional connection with this character. I can see her motivations, and I hope that her story ends happily once her role in this one is over. I once again realized that I care more about a random character I've barely been introduced to than Layla. Perrin's wife, her corpse is in the fridge. Dana comes on to Rand, and he backs away in a awkward moment that's awkward on purpose, so very well done. She says that it was too strong and walks for the door, stopping to ask if it was the hair that made him hesitant. She closes the door, mumbling about how braiding her hair made her look too much like Egwene. She grabs Rand's sword and says she has plans for him and Matt. She backs away to look out the window and see if Matt's returned, as we watch Rand scream to frantically hit the door. We cut back to Tom giving the Aiel man his last rites, now that he's been buried. He and Matt introduce themselves to each other, and Matt asks for his money back. Tom reaches into his pocket, but Matt already has his pouch back. Another really good highlight, just kind of shadowed by how abruptly we shifted from Rand's situation. And we abruptly cut back into it. Rand is still banging on the door, and Donna says it's made of ironwood and it's so strong he won't be able to break it down. But he keeps pushing against it anyways. Then she reminds us, remember I said you could have as much loud gay butt sex as you wanted. This room is soundproof. No one can hear you outside. So, it doesn't matter. Rand pushes the door down. It really doesn't seem like this plan was thought through. I don't know what she was going to do when Matt came back. She would have to unlock the door to let him in. Rand could have told him to run at that point. If Matt did come in, it's 2 against 1. Even if she has a sword, they can probably do something, especially if her plans involve needing them alive. Also, if she makes Rand unlock the door, he could have just run outside and avoided her. Like none of this makes any sense, but it's all fine because Rand did push the door down, and he bumps into Matt, tells him to run. Donna chases them, and then uses a side path to cut off their escape. She talks about how she's dreamed of the five from Emmons Field instead of the four, reiterates that one of them's the dragon. Rand asks who she really is, but that doesn't matter. She says she's going to be somebody. Donna, the lowly innkeeper of a town people stop into on their way to Camelin, will be remembered for millennia. She'll be known for giving the Dragon Reborn over to the Dark One, just like Ishamael, the last person to fulfill this task. Rand asks if she's just going to let the Dark One kill them, but she says that's the Aes Sedai that actually want to kill them. The Dark One actually wants the dragon to save them from the endless turning of the wheel, which spins out horrors that she's heard through her occupation as an innkeeper. Rand says that he and Matt are just gonna walk away and leave, and Donna tries to taunt them, saying that a fade is on its way, and you can't outrun a fade. She then gives them a menacing smile as a knife pierces the back of her neck, exiting her throat. Tom emerges from the shadows while Rand stares in shock. He, Tom urges the two boys to move forward. He's heading east, and they're going to join him. Rand stands over Donna's body to retrieve his sword, and we see her blood pooling out of her neck and darkens a little bit, and that darkness transitions into a forested mountainside. It was a really, really good transition. I liked it. Lan, Nynaeve, and Moraine are met by Aes Sedai of various colored factions. The Red Sister we saw in the first episode rides up alone and gloats about the false dragon they've captured. And we end on a close-up of Loghain's face. Episode 4's cold open shows us the false dragon Loghain before he was captured. He and his army captured the city of Gildon, and he stood before the king of that city. Strange figures whispered in his ears that Loghain should kill him, but instead he healed the king and made him an ally. The episode continues with Nynaeve approaching a large camp filled with various Aes Sedai factions. All of this is going to be completely original to the show. None of this was in the books. So I'm interested to see what we're going to find. We get shots that hint at the Red Sisters' misandry. They're the only ones that don't have warders, you know? Lan meets up with an old friend who tells him how things are going. The White Tower has more to do, fewer Aes Sedai to help. The Amerlin seat, essentially the Queen of Tarvalin, wants him and Moraine to be brought back. Meanwhile, Moraine receives healing from Karenni, an Aes Sedai that's already exhausted by the effort she's had to use to restrain Loghain from touching Saidin. She reminds us that he's a false dragon with many followers, then says that he can only be shielded from the one power by the three strongest Aes Sedai in the camp, and they've been taking shifts to work in pairs. Moraine takes over for the woman that healed her, which bothered me a lot. If Karenni was one of three that could keep Loghain shielded, and that was exhausting her, and she further exhausted herself by healing Moraine when there are other Aes Sedai around, that just seems like a bad idea. And the fact that Moraine takes a shift to shield Loghain immediately after being healed is just really weird. Because with as serious as her injury was, she should still be nearly incapacitated. She should still need some bed rest before she's up to strength. And there's a couple explanations I can think of from the books, but the show didn't tell me that that's what was done. So it's just one of those things. You gotta tell me that you've done this thing so I can believe the next thing you're doing. Because all you really have to say is one person healed Moraine, and then one person said, hey, I'm gonna give you energy. Because that's a power they have. Just say that they did that. I don't believe Karenni giving Moraine energy. She's already exhausted. It would be another Aes Sedai woman. And why is Karenni the one doing the healing? Have someone that isn't shielding Logain do the healing. Think this through for like 5 seconds, and you'll make it way better. Land's friend Stepan is a warder bonded to Karenni, and he leaves Rand to talk to her. They joke about Moraine and Land being quiet, perhaps secretive. They joke that their dinners must be awkward. Leandrin, the red sister we saw face Logain in episode 1, has been trying to convince others that he should be gentled. This would permanently separate him from touching the true source again. And the conversation ends with a bit of a heartfelt moment where Stepan tells Karenni she needs to rest. She says he worries more than he used to. And he puts a hand on her shoulder and says, I sleep less so I have the time. I've barely been introduced to these people, but I've been endeared to them by this one little moment right here. The two of them seem to have chemistry together. The lines are just delivered so well. And I'm just looking at this thinking, wow, I really care more about two people I just met than Layla, Perrin's wife, because this show did not make me care about Perrin's wife. How did you bungle this so badly? We cut to Perrin and Egwene. Perrin doesn't trust the Tuatha'an, and Egwene says they should leave if he doesn't. But then they're convinced to stay because the traveling people are going to Tarvalin. So we get a zoom out shot of their wagons, and they look really accurate to the description we got in the books. They look really good. Tom, Rand, and Matt are riding their horses, and Rand pulls Matt aside to talk about how he's suspicious of the Gleeman. And then we cut to Logain sitting in his cage. Moraine talks to the other Aes Sedai woman that's helping shield him. And then we get a suggestion that maybe the Red Aja has already gentled the dragon. Then Logain attempts to break the shield, but they hold it tight. Then we cut to Nynaeve watching the camp from a distance as Leandrin approaches her. They talk. Tom, Matt, and Rand arrive outside a farm. A man approaches them with a bow and suggests they're up to no good. Rand tries to de-escalate the situation, saying they were just gonna rest in the barn for the night. Then he says that the man has no intention to kill because he's using the whole fist to draw the bowstring. And that is the most goose-brained line of reasoning you could have come up with. Yeah, the man could still loose the bow into you. That's not how this works, Rand. Leandrin and Nynaeve are still talking. Lan approaches and Leandrin leaves. Nynaeve asks him if everyone in the White Tower is the same as her, and he says that she'll see soon enough. We go back to the Tinker's caravan, and Perrin is asking for his friends, but they just were lucky that they were found by the Tinkers. It was an unexpected thing. They then explain the way of the leaf, which is just pacifism, and the conversation moves on to the idea of weapons. An axe is mentioned, making Perrin obviously uneasy. He is stunned into silence as he is asked whether his life has been better or worse since the day he picked up the axe. Matt and Rand are mucking stables while Tom prepares to perform for the family. Matt grumbles about how Tom isn't doing any work, then walks off saying he needs a break. He throws up behind the barn and Marshadar is oozing from his lips. I know what they're doing, and I don't like it. Instead of misleading the audience into thinking that the journey is taking its toll on Matt, we're shown that he's obviously been cursed by the Shadar Logoth dagger, and he goes into a trance that's interrupted by a young girl giving him some bread to share with the others. He asks her name, but her mom said not to give it. He mentions his sisters and how they're safe at home. The girl gives him her dolls to give to his sisters. Doll's name is Brigida, and she's always wanted to see the world, foreshadowing future events for fans of the novels. Rand and Tom have a conversation about Tom's nephew, a man who could channel and was gentled by the Aes Sedai, and cut his own thread out of the pattern soon after. Tom promises to stay with them because of the trouble they're in. And this moment's fine, but for some reason, they don't specify Sidene, the male half of the One Power, is corrupted, tainted by the Dark One. It's just the One Power. It's a strange thing not to make these things clear. I don't think it's that complicated to say men and women channel a specific half of the true source. And thinking back on it, I actually haven't heard Sidene mentioned once in this entire show. We cut to a silent moment between Moran and Karenni. They're watching Logain. Then we move to the campfire with the warders and Nynaeve. They have a fun conversation until Nynaeve notes that they serve Aes Sedai. Steppen and Land explain that it's like a special bond warders have with Aes Sedai. They aren't servants, it's something mutual, and it's something that they're proud of. Several of the men leave with the women they're bonding to, and their claims of exhaustion hint at something more. Nynaeve asks, trying to be subtle, and gets chuckles from the rest of the people at the fire. Lan says that he is also tired and goes to Moraine. They try to figure out if Logain might be the Dragon Reborn. They suggest that the Dark One has no more of an idea who the dragon is than them. This is just a mess. In the books, Balsamon already knows who the dragon is. He appears in his dreams, telling the dragon, "You are Lews Therin Telamon." And he sows mistrust between him and the Aes Sedai. Balsamon offers power and eternal life, and more. The dragon can stand at the side of the great Lord of the Dark or be annihilated by him. But this show needs people to ask who the dragon is. Is it a guy or a girl? Have we met them yet? Maybe this mystery would completely fall apart if the concept of Sidene and Sidar were brought up. That's probably why in episode 1 you had the Red Sister say the Force is female and men make it toxic. Because if you knew of the Dark One's taint on Sidene, then everyone would immediately know the dragon is going to be a man. When you added in the details about the Aiel in episode 3, everyone would already know who the dragon is. The mystery would be gone already. And we can't have the mystery gone yet. We gotta do some more misleading. The moment between Moraine and Lan ends with a sorrowful look over the past 20 years of their work. Lan then says that Moraine always gets emotional when he drinks. Go back to Egwene and Perrin. Egwene's dancing with the Tinkers. Perrin watches for a bit, then vanishes. Egwene asks Aram about the song, and he sarcastically says it was one before the breaking of the world that would bring peace and harmony if found again. Egwene suggests that there's a chance they already found it. Perrin does some work for the Tinkers. They talk about the Way of the Leaf again. He combats it with an obvious argument that maybe there will be a day when you have to fight back. Rand tells Matt that he always has his back before blowing out a candle and having a nightmare where he sees all the other people from Emmons Field walking around. Perrin is hammering a nail into a corpse, presumably the one we've had on hand in the fridge. Matt has blood all over his hands. And then the Dark One yells at Rand. He wakes up and Matt isn't there. Tom pulls him out of the barn and they go into the farmhouse to find that the family is dead. It's set up to look like Matt is the murderer, but we soon realize that there's a Fade up on the second floor of the building. Tom stays behind to fight the Fade while the other two escape, and Matt accidentally drops Brigitte as he runs. The Aes Sedai are having an internal struggle because Leandrin and the other Red Sisters really want a gentle Logain. She says that if he breaks free, their oaths allow them to do it. We cut to Lan having a moment of prayer. Nynaeve joins him and says words in the old tongue she doesn't actually know the meaning of. They were the last thing her parents said before they died, and Lan tells her it was the last thing the King of Manetheren said to his wife. We shall go to our land so our children will always hold us and never be alone. Suddenly the camp is under attack. Arrows come hurtling towards the camp, and the Aes Sedai use the power to block them. Where Logain is sitting, he suddenly finds the ability to channel and knocks the women holding him at bay unconscious. Moraine uses the opportunity to talk to him, and then after listening to him talk about how he hears voices from his ancestry, she says that he is not the dragon because the dragon will be like the raging sun compared to him. And he then gets told that the voices are just the madness overtaking him. The other Aes Sedai wake up at the right moment to miss everything that was just said. Then they try to shield Locaine again, but he's able to kill Karenni first. Steppen feels this, and Lan notices. So he, Nynaeve, and Steppen rush to the cave. They find that the women were successful at shielding Locaine, but it's a struggle to keep the shield on him. Steppen, enraged by the fact that Karenni has been killed, attacks Logain, and it breaks the shield just enough that he can touch the axis with the one power and turns them into a shrapnel bomb that hits everyone except Nynaeve. And it's definitely gonna be fatal and lands on the ground, dying, and his neck squirting out blood. It's terrible. Oh no. Then Nynaeve summons the ability to do an area of effect heal and restores everyone's HP to at least 70% of maximum. The Aes Sedai link together again as Leandrin says, "Let the hands of the White Tower fall on you, Logain Ablar, and take back what nature itself does not want you to hold." In short, the force is female, men make it toxic, and this line is just nauseatingly dumb. Nobody chooses to have the ability to channel either half of the one power. You are literally given that ability by nature. The lummox that wrote this should be ashamed of themselves. Logain is gentled, and he lies on the ground sobbing. As the dust settles, we see Steppen mourning the loss of Karenni, and then we end the episode with a close-up of Nynaeve's face, because she's probably the dragon. And this is as good as the show gets. It's all downhill from here. We open with the burial of the men and women that lost their lives in the battle from last episode. Logain's followers are given the same dignity as the Aes Sedai. Steppen buries Karenni himself, tearfully taking her ring and putting it around his neck before covering her with the white cloth. Moraine says a last rite of passage. And the biggest issue I had is I kind of wish that the Aes Sedai had a cloth that covered them that was the same as their Aja. But that probably would have ruined the aesthetic of the shot, you know. Whatever. We skip to a month later. The Aes Sedai group reach Tarvalin with Logain in tow. Moraine and Lan talk. They don't know where anyone is. Like we didn't already know this. Rand and Matt show up at Tarvalin with the long line of people. Matt curses out a child and doesn't use a term like goat kisser or anything like that. No, he has to use contemporary modern cursing because the show is not creative. Matt assures Rand that he's just tired, but we already know that's not the case because the show didn't give us time to be misled into thinking, oh, he's just exhausted from the journey. We already know he's cursed with Shadar Logoth stuff. Mar Shadar leaks from its mouth. Why? I don't know. It just does. Rand says he's seen a mountain in the distance before, and they walk to see Tarvalin below them. We've diverted significantly from the books at this point. I know that everyone's going to regroup in Tarvalin instead of Caemlyn, and this change worried me a lot, and I had very little hope that it would work, but I knew that if it was handled well, it could. Rand and Matt explore the city, they get a suite from the merchant, and they find an inn. Matt still thinks he killed the family from the farm, and Rand tries to reassure him that it wasn't him. And it doesn't work both in the show and as a viewer because it just feels like a month didn't pass. It just feels like this is the next day. And I don't really feel like we got a real good sense of a month passing. Nynaeve is brought to a room in the White Tower, and Moraine promises to let her know when the other villagers are found. The Tinkers are stopped by the White Cloaks outside of Tarvalin. Valda sees Perrin and Egwene and demands they be brought to him. The Tinkers lock arms to protect them, letting them run. But the two are captured anyways. Why does Valda want them? Why do the White Cloaks want them at all? I don't know. In the books, it was the middle of the night. They were alone in a hiding place. The White Cloaks found them and demanded surrender. Perrin had an axe on him and refused to put it down. And then a wolf bravely sacrificed itself so that they could escape, but Perrin was so distraught over the wolf's murder that he took revenge on two of the children of the light. In the show, Valda just recognizes him from over a month ago and just wants them. This means that the children of the light are just cartoonishly evil. If you had the justification that Perrin killed two of them, well, it would make more sense. But now they're just beating people up and trampling someone with the horse and kidnapping Perrin and Egwene because they felt like it. Because they're the bad guys. The books established a good reason for why they needed to grab Perrin and Egwene, why they would have wanted to grab Perrin and Egwene. They thought that dark friends were about because they saw wolves, and then two of them got killed by someone who might actually be a dark friend, and even if he isn't, they're going to execute him because they want revenge. Removing that desire for vengeance makes the children of the light shallow. They're just bad guys to be bad guys. Rand is in a library and he runs into some strange being. He draws his sword and the beast comments on the excitability of humans. His name is Loyal and he's an Ogier, not an ogre. He says that Rand is an Aiel and insists this, despite Rand's denials. It's a really good humorous moment, and it's one of the last highlights of the show. They talk about a book, how one person from Rand's village thought that they were Jane Farstrider. Then we hear a parade outside, and Matt and Rand watch it from the balcony. We get a glimpse of Pat on Fane again, and I really want to see more of him. Steppen leads the parade to the shock of onlookers because an Aes Sedai fell to the false dragon. Logain is pelted with rotten food as people demand his death, and then he gives Rand or maybe Matt a weird look because maybe one of them's the dragon. So they talk about the prophecy. We have a ceremony where Steppen dresses in white and drops Karenni's ring into a bowl of fire and molten gold. Then Lan goes to Moraine and holds her arm in silence. We then cut to Egwene. She's naked, as she is washed and groomed, then dressed in white. Valder straps her to a chair and puts Perrin on a strange torture device. He tries to threaten Egwene into channeling, then starts cutting into Perrin's back. Perrin's eyes glow yellow, and we hear the howling of wolves. Maybe he's the dragon. Valder rambles to them about how the one power is of the dark and how nobody should be able to use it. He says that he knows Egwene is a witch and assumes that Perrin is her warder, so he sets up a prisoner's dilemma of sorts. If Egwene channels, she'll die, and if she does not, Perrin will. The problem is, there's no telling if he will keep his word. For as intense of a moment as this is supposed to be, it's rather bland compared to how it was handled in the books. In the books, they were traveling with the children of the light for several days. They're going to go have a trial. One of the children gives them a chance to go free. That's a little suspicious and might have led to their death had they accepted it. But that same night, Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve pull up this covert operation to rescue them, and It's just so much fun. But here, they're just like, oh, if one of us has to die, it should be me. No, it should be me. No, it should be me. No, it should be me. Absolutely riveting. Stepan drunkenly asks Nynaeve for sleep medicine, and then she wanders the hall so that we can have Leandrin say, the women hold one power, but men so control much of the world, and they're rarely kind to little girls who show a spark being greater than they are. The line doesn't make any sense. Not all women can channel, and some men are just born with the ability to channel. It's Sidene and Sidar. They don't mention Sidar or Sidene. It's just A1 power. Great. It's all the same thing. We're going to have a lot of questions if it really is all the same thing. Back at the end, Rand is tending to Matt, then Loyal suddenly brings Nynaeve into the room. He starts talking about her braid for no reason. I know Loyal rambles a lot in the books, but it's a tangent on something he was asked about or something he was already talking about, not just, well, now that I've introduced you back together, I'm going to start talking about braid. It's never anything like that. That just doesn't make sense. It's just an awkward moment. Nynaeve sees Matt, and he's relieved to see her. Then he suddenly gets angry and then apologetic. Then she steps outside to talk to Rand. They think Matt can channel. Then they say Egwene is strong because she got over an illness once. And in the books, this illness was actually cured by Nynaeve using the one power. She just didn't know she was using it yet. So we cut to Egwene trying to channel, and they're still debating it. It should be me. It should be me. But I killed Layla. Then Valda comes in and continues to torture Perrin by cutting his back with the knife because he's a cartoon villain now. Meanwhile, Egwene says, it wasn't your fault and it may take your entire life to realize. She then shoots a fireball, but it's a diversion to distract Valda from the fact that she's burning the ropes that are restraining Perrin. When Perrin stands up, Valda, a man who's supposed to be a serious threat, is just turned into a cowardly little man as Egwene stabs a steak knife and puts it in his shoulder. She then grabs his collection of Aes Sedai rings as they run outside to see that Perrin has summoned wolves and they are pre-enacting the future Reddit admin shutdown of r/white cloaks because they consider this show a insult to the source material. We cut to Leandrin talking to Moraine. Lan talks to Stepan, who is sad. Moraine asks Lana to bond with Stepan. Stepan tells Lan that he'll take her offer, then talks about Nynaeve. Land wakes up and finds out that Stepan gave him Nynaeve's sleeping medicine. Then he finds Stepan in a hallway and realizes he has committed Sudoku. We cut to a funeral where Lan is told to put his hands on Stepan's corpse to relieve the others of their grief. They pound their chests as part of a ceremony, and for a brief moment we see a slight crack in Lan's stoicism. I expect that when we cut away, he'll have joined the others in pounding his chest and maybe have a tear or maybe a few tears running down his cheek. Instead, the show turns a Lan Mandragoran into a sniveling, hyperventilating mess. It cuts away, and I pray that it doesn't continue, that he regains some composure and brings the mask back on just a little bit. I just want it to be a brief break of his stoicism. But no, he starts howling into the sky and he tears open his ceremonial garb to rub his nipples and wail. And this is the moment the show died, along with my willingness to give it any benefit of the doubt. With 3 episodes left, I don't know how it could get any worse. The cold open for episode 6 shows us a girl and her one-armed father fishing. She can use the one power. They come home and find their house has been burned down and they somehow didn't notice. Like, the smell or people buy it or anything. It's just smoldering. The man sends his daughter off from the boat and she asks him to come with her. But he can't do that any more than a fish can touch the moon. But she says they do it every night by touching its reflection. Her name's Suan Sanche, the Amerlin seat, who has the women who stilled Logain before her. She makes a grand entrance as Logain is brought before everyone. She frees him of his chains because he's been gentled. The two talk. He insults him for being weak now, then brags about killing Karenni. Suan Sanche reads through this. She realizes that he wants to die and says that he will serve as an example to all false dragons and men that dare to channel. Which is odd because nobody chooses to channel. It's not a dare, it's just a thing that happens. And they still haven't mentioned the concept of Sidene and Sidar more than halfway through the first season. Leandrin, Alana, and Moraine are asked about stilling him, and they argue that it was self-defense, which it was, and that Logain could have killed them all, which he almost did, but Swan punishes Leandrin because she was in charge of the link they all had. Then Leandra's like, well, Moraine found a powerful channeler. What about that? But also, she should have known about the Trollocs and Logain's army sooner because I don't know where she's been for the last 20 years and blah, 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 blah. Leandrin then says that maybe Swan is showing favoritism to the Blue Aja, forcing the Amerlin to press Moraine, who says she cannot say what she was doing. The Amerlin tells her to get on her knees, and then starts yelling about being insulted and shouting that she owns the whole world, and that Moraine should beg her mother for mercy as she kisses the marble beneath her feet. The scene felt just really weird, and I didn't get the point of it. What's going on? Why did they assassinate Swan's character in this way? Why is she just a mean person that yells? I don't get it. We then get more drama with Moraine and Leandrin. They talk. Moraine drinks tea and sees Nynaeve and Loyal. Lan has been to see Matt, and they reach the room where he's in. Ren puts a sword to Lan's throat, and Matt even thinks he can channel. He thinks he's the dragon. Then he lunges at Moraine with the dagger, and she uses the power to take it away. Then cures him of Shatter Logos curse completely. Then tells Rand that the dagger was feeding off of Matt's darkness, and that if he touches it again, bad things happen. Then she chastises Nynaeve for her pride, saying a line that would sound smart if I hadn't just witnessed what I had seen. This single moment was just another shoveling of dirt in this hole that the show has dug for itself. I don't see any redemption in sight. In the books, everyone regroups in Camelin. Moraine tries to heal Matt of the curse, but is unsuccessful. The second book starts in a place called Faldara, where Matt loses a dagger and four Aes Sedai have to work together to save his life, but he at most has 6 months to live, and if he does not find the dagger to have the curse properly removed from him in Tarvalin, he will die. He does get the dagger back, and in book 3, he's making his way to Tarvalin, but by the time he reaches the city, he's holding on by a thread. It takes 10 Aes Sedai using a powerful artifact to cure him of the curse, and they lock the dagger away in a box. The tension surrounding the dagger, the potentiality that Matt might actually die, all of this, potential points of conflict between the characters and some extra points for drama to occur, thrown away for what? We've moved from Camelin to Tarvalin. Just take Matt to the White Tower. Bring sisters down to him. Do something that shows how serious this curse is. I guess it's just not a serious show because we cut to Moraine in a public bath with naked women everywhere because this is a mature, grown up show. She talks to someone that was present for the meeting of the Amerlin seat and they gossip in a public bath. Why? What kind of goat spawn toad would have thought to put this in? In the last episode, Moraine talked to someone in a private bedchamber. Why not do that again? Maybe have them talk somewhere in the city that's a little secluded. Almost anywhere but a public bath. Where rumors are going to spread that, oh yeah, they were talking in the bathtub. Why? Why? Moraine then learns that Perrin and Egwene are in the city and goes to see them. Egwene shows her the collection of rings and says Valda won't be a problem anymore. They look over their shoulders and cautiously discuss Perrin's eyes and the wolves. Egwene says he might be the dragon. Moraine says maybe someone else is. Then Moraine goes to Swan's dream because, they
Moraine
need to
asks to
kiss
be
and make
expelled
up
from
the tower. Then Swan has a vision that the Eye of the World is the Dark One's prison and he can be defeated there, which makes no sense as an adaptational change. In the books, the Eye of the World was first mentioned in the dreams by the Dark One. He tells Rand, Mat, and Perrin that the Eye will never serve them. Moraine learns of this in Camelin after healing Mat, when the three of them finally decide to confess the fact that the Father of Lies has been haunting them in their dreams. Upon hearing of this, Moraine decides that she wants to warn someone known as the Green Man. Changing the Eye of the World to the Dark One's prison is likely an attempt to skirt around the fact that in the books he's imprisoned at Shale Ghul, a large mountain that might seem too similar to Mordor from The Lord of the Rings. We cut to Lan and Moraine walking and talking. Then she talks to Loyal, and then it has Nynaeve and Egwene meet the Amerlin. Nynaeve doesn't like her, and she is spicy. Ooh. Then Moraine is in front of the Amerlin again, and here I realize that the point of making Swan and Moraine an explicit couple rather than hinting that they might have been that close in the books is so this whole moment can be as fetishistic as possible. Moraine, a woman of nobility, must get on her knees for Swan Sanche, who came from rags, and she must kiss Swan's ring. Then Swan makes Moraine say an oath on the oath rod for some reason, and it's an oath so conditional that the oath rod might as well have not been used. You can't come back until Swan says so? Then why not make it for a certain length of time? Why not have a letter written so that you can say your exile is ended? Oh yeah, that's right! Because we needed the explicit lesbian couple to both put their hands on the rod while the white stuff comes out of it. That's why. That's why.
If we had all of our cast members be 17 or 18, if you're watching it, it would read as a much younger show that's not for adult audiences in the same way. And so,
after all, this is a serious grown-up show that's trying to retell the story of the Wheel of Time while respecting the source material. Right? Moraine then pleonastically flatters Swan Sanche before being shunned by everyone in the room.
I, Moraine Sedai, do swear to honor and obey Swan Sanche, daughter of the river, clever as a pike, strong as the tides, and never return until she calls on her.
Then everyone goes to a weird stone gate that Moraine has to use the power to use. and then everyone goes in, but Matt stays behind. It's just absurd now. The way gates can be opened by anyone that knows what to do, but now in the show, we specifically need a channeler to open them. There's no good reason for this change. This episode was terrible, and the show keeps getting worse. Somehow they're gonna find a way to dig deeper. They're doing the one thing you don't do in Minecraft. They're digging just straight down. They've hit bedrock, and they're gonna just keep digging until they fall out of the world. Episode seven's cold open shows us an injured pregnant Aiel woman running through an empty snowy battlefield. She's carrying bloodstained spears on her back and starts having contractions as she sits down by a rock that she checked around several times to make sure no one was near, only to be attacked by a teleporting man in armor that showed up. He gets his leg with one of her spears, then runs and jumps to grab his cape to pull him to the ground and stab into his brains from under his helmet. Another soldier then comes, and she's able to get the spear through his armor, then uses him as a human shield against a throwing weapon before throwing her spear at the guy throwing knives at her. She then somehow takes on three guys at the same time, and then the contractions only occur at the most convenient moments until she's defeated two of them. Then finally, one of them happens at an inconvenient moment, allowing her to get grabbed by the last man standing who stabs her in the side, narrowly missing her unborn child. But this woman is so strong that she manages to break his arm and then use his own knife against him, ramming it through his throat. She then steals his cape so that she can swaddle her baby in it while she crawls back to the rock and tears open her pants to give birth. The last dude in armor shows up and points a blade at her throat. My biggest issue with this scene is the fact that she's pregnant. It's just also the fact that she never lifts her veil. It is something the show's already established about the Aiel. I think having her fight alongside more maidens of the spear, or perhaps having the father of the unborn child there to help defend her, would have been nice. I think it could have been a moment where it's like the last person comes up to her and she manages to kill him, showing that she's not entirely defenseless, even in her most vulnerable. Something just a little more realistic than, yeah, this pregnant woman is running around, jumping and running and everything while having contractions. I'm not buying it, bro. I'm just not buying it. We return to our main cast of characters who are upset that they've left Matt behind. Brain just leaves him and goes on ahead as they talk about channeling to open the Waygate. Loyal says that they shouldn't because Mosh and Shin will be attracted to channeling, so they go with Moraine, who is talking to Lan about how the dagger was feeding on Matt's dark side, and Matt has turned to the dark side of the Force, so that we know this show is darker than the books. Loyal then mentioned that there used to be life and colors in the way. He then says that one wrong step means you'll fall into an endless void. Perrin sees something up ahead. It's a guiding stone that's been defaced. Loyal says he needs some time to decipher it, so they set up camp for the night. Rand and Egwene sleep in each other's arm, and Perrin gives them a weird look. A strange whistling wakes them up. Egwene asks Rand if he did something, then a Trolloc jumps out at them. Egwene accidentally channels to push it away, bringing Mosh and Shin to them. Moraine says Mosh and Shin will speak to them and that they should not listen. They run through the ways and find a gate they can exit through. But then, before Moraine can open it, Mosh and Shin catches them. If this had happened in the books, the malignant entity known as Mosh and Shin would have peeled their skin and gleefully played with their organs. But in this show, it just whispers their deepest, darkest feelings to them, menacingly. It says Moraine's wrong about everything and will murder the Two Rivers folk. Egwene is just an imposter. Rand is told that Egwene will never love her as much as he loves her. Then Perrin hears that he wanted his wife dead because he loved someone more than her. Lan's told that he'll watch Moraine die, then Nynaeve is told she will do nothing as her friends die painfully. Nynaeve then shouts at Mashin Shin, which gives us time to hold it at bay long enough to open the gate and everyone can make it out. Safe and sound now. Moraine says to ignore what they heard as they go to the city of Faldara and have an audience with Lord Agilmar, who assumes they were sent there by the White Tower and pridefully denies Aes Sedai help. In the books, he welcomes them warmly and would gladly accept help because of how hard it is to hold back the blight. Why this change was made is anyone's guess. We cut back to the Waygate and Padan Fane exits and goes to Faldara himself. Agilmar's sister leads everyone to rooms, and we learn that she trained at the White Tower, but her ability to use the One Power is weak. Moraine asks her to tell the Red Aja to look for Mat. Then everyone goes into the city and talk about Machin Shin. Perrin sees Fane. Nynaeve says Fane's dead. They end up in a pub. Perrin tells Rand about the Way of the Leaf. And we're introduced to Min Farshaw, who is 20 years older than she is in the books. Min has a viewing about the villagers, and then Moraine takes them to a common room in the palace. Nynaeve asks who Min was, and Moraine says she still doesn't know who the dragon is and thought Min could help. Because whoever goes to the Eye of the World with her and isn't the dragon is going to die. So she's going to take all of them, meaning that what Machin Shin said was true. Perrin suggests that Mat could be the dragon, and that there's a chance Moraine is wrong. Moraine then says doubt is the crutch that leads to the dark side. Nynaeve tells her that they'll discuss it, and Moraine leaves them saying that they can't run or hide from the pattern. See, this is the problem. In the books, the Eye of the World is this weird place located in the Blight. It's something you can only find once when you need it most. An oasis that never appears in the same place twice. Going there didn't kill anyone in the books. We're only adding this here so that the melodrama that follows can exist. The Emmons Fielders are left knowing that they don't have a choice, no matter how big Nynaeve talks. Egwene says they need to protect their families and must, no matter what the cost. Nynaeve argues with her. Rand brings up the fact that Moraine probably knew the Eye of the World would mean death for at least 3 of them. Nynaeve and Egwene argue more. Egwene is going to the Eye and she tells Nynaeve to stop being prideful. Rand's sad because they've lost Mat. Perrin goes on about how the dragon might be Mat. Egwene scoffs at the idea, then Rand is annoyed at her, saying she never gave Mat a chance. She never got to know him. Mat's a fighter. He fights for his friends and family. Egwene interrupts him to say that Mat left them, and she says, dark side. He had the dagger. Oh no. Rand's like, no, you don't know anything about the dagger. Then Mat left them. Don't you know? That's what Egwene says. She says Mat left them. Rand's like, well, you're the expert when it comes to that because you're the only one that really left me. And Perrin's like, don't talk to her like that. And Nynaeve yells at him and Rand to stop. Perrin says he owes Egwene an apology. And Rand says, I don't because I say the truth and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And Nynaeve is so amazing. She says, I'm tired of you two fighting over her like she's something you can win.
Treat her like that.
Stop it!
Excuse me? You owe her an apology for what? The truth?
Stop! Just stop! I am so tired of you two fighting over her like she's something you can win.
Rand is just as confused as the viewers should be. And then he realizes, oh yeah, the day I started dating Egwene was the same day Perrin proposed to Layla. Because that's something we can just shoehorn in now. Moraine talks to Lan, and he has feelings for Nynaeve. He goes out to eat with friends. Nynaeve follows him. She spies on the meal, and he invites her to join. Then they go back to the palace and kiss. Then Rand trains with the bow, but he keeps missing the bullseye. Egwene shows up and they make up, and then they kiss because he promises to be her warrior. Then Nynaeve is getting dressed because something more happened than a kiss. And then she talks to Land and learns he's the king of Malkir, a land overtaken by the Blight. Rand wakes up in a cold sweat and he has a flashback to something we should have seen in episode 1, where Tam tells him that he found a baby on Dragonmount. And then Rand goes and does some more archery, but this time he's hitting all the bullseyes. And then we learned that Rand used channeling to break down the door in episode 3, and then he also used channeling to push away the Trolloc in the ways. Then Mashin Chin just told him the truth and said, Rand, you're the dragon. He goes to Min and she says that her first vision was a man holding a baby that was impossible. While we see the cold open scene continue with Tam helping Rand's mom push, and then she dies. The subtitles tell me that Rand shudders at this idea, and then Min jokes about seeing rainbows, carnivals, and 3 beautiful women in this future. When pressed, she says she doesn't know how his immediate future pans out, leaving him to dwell on what his future course of action should be. The next morning, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve decide they're going to go to the Eye of the World, but Rand isn't with them. We cut to him in the hallway, and he knocks on a door. Nynaeve answers her door, and it's Lan, meaning that Moraine's answering the door for Rand. Rand says, it's me, ending the game of Who's the Dragon Reborn. With 2 words, this show tells us that they are just going to skip over a ton of important character development with Rand and just have him accept that he's the Dragon Reborn. And the show is going to be worse for it. The cold open for episode 8 takes place 3,000 years ago. We see a man and a woman arguing, presumably in the Old Tongue. The man's name is Lews Therin, and the woman's name is Latra. He asks her why she would break the Aes Sedai in 2, putting men against women. She accuses him of being the one that will break them. He says she can't stop him. A baby's cry interrupts them. He then says they have a chance to do something that's never been done before. They have a chance to cage the Dark One and stop his influence from touching the world again. She reminds them of their oaths to serve all and asserts that caging the Dark One only serves his pride. He insists that she's wrong, and she fears what would happen if they expose the source of the One Power to the Dark One. She thinks it'll corrupt it. Lews Therin and his men would throw progress back 1,000 years or more. But he says that if men and women of the Aes Sedai work together, they won't fail. She would rather remain to pick up the pieces. What they're trying to do here is they're trying to present the arrogance of man we heard in the opening monologue of episode 1. But what Lews Therin seems to want is something selfless. He's just been denied the assistance he needs to make it a sure thing. Rand and Moraine walk in the Blight, and after they find a body, Moraine tells him not to touch anything, because the Blight is a rot that consumes everything in its path. In Faldara, Egwene is gonna try and follow them, but Perrin stops her. In the Blight, Moraine finds a place where they can rest, and they see the 7 Tellers of Malkir. They seem like they've been in ruins for 100,000 years, but it's only been 40. Rand and Moraine sit down in the Blight, touching things we were told they should not. She then gives him something to help keep up his strength. Lan and Nynaeve talk on the balcony. He can't feel Moraine's bond. And then he says that she won't marry him. Rand is touching grass in the Blight. Moraine asks if he's having dreams. He says the Dark One's coming, and a blade comes in and stabs Moraine. Dark One stands over Rand, who looses an arrow into his eye. The man shoves it in deeper. The mask of CGI burns, becoming a normal human face. He then says that Rand is the dragon, even though he looks nothing like Lews Therin. The Dark One starts talking to Rand about how useless his efforts are and how he's too weak to succeed. He laughs at the idea that Tam is Rand's father and calls Rand Luce Theron. He tries to sow seeds of doubt in Rand about the Aes Sedai. Then Rand stabs himself in the gut, saying, "It's a dream." Rand wakes, and the scene starts over where it began. He's touching grass and blight. But this time, Moraine doesn't get stabbed. She tries to ask what the Dark One said, but Rand won't give her an answer, so she gives him a Sa Angreal, a magical artifact that amplifies channeling. He then suggests that Moraine thought or hoped that the dragon would be Egwene. Egwene and Nynaeve talk on the balcony, and they know Trollocs are coming because of that day in the Two Rivers when they felt something weird in the air. Moraine channels in the blight. Rand readies his bow. He asks if he can be taught how to channel, but Moraine says she can't because it'll bring her closer to madness. And then he asks more questions. Everyone but Lan goes to the bar with Min. A horn blows in the distance. Rand and Moraine are still walking through the blight. In Faldara, they talk about how Trollocs are in Tarwin's Gap. Ogmore prepares for battle. Rand and Moraine reach the Eye of the World. It's no oasis. There's no green man. He just asks Moraine to stay behind, not wanting her to die, but she goes on. We then see that Land has entered the blight, and he is seeing the towers of Malkir. Then Agomar dons his armor as his sister tries to discourage him from battle. And he says it's the last battle, and they're sending messages out into the world. Rand and Moraine approach the Eye of the World. Rand has memories that he can't piece together. He touches a symbol in the middle of a pool and is transported into another dream. He's back home in Emmons Field. He lives with Egwene, and she has their daughter. And in the waking world, the Dark One stills Moraine while Rand is defenseless. We cut to the Battle of Tarwin's Gap, and citizens flee Faldara. Soldiers are entering Agomar's throne room with pickaxes to hack at the stone beneath. We go to the battle, and there are warriors using crossbows, and they say fire instead of loose. Meanwhile, Agomar's sister is just standing around with two other women as Nynaeve and Egwene join them. Perrin and Loyal talk, and Perrin's like, the way of the leaf is garbage. And Loyal says there are options other than violence. You just have to ask how to help if you don't know. Rand realizes he's in a dream, then he's convinced he isn't. Then the Dark One freezes the moment. They talk, and it's clear that the Dark One's trying to tempt Rand. Moraine in the waking world puts a knife to Rand's throat. The men in the throne room keep digging the stone beneath the throne, and they give Perrin a pickaxe to help as night falls over the city. Then the Dark One continues to tempt Rand, and he slashes Egwene's throat in the dream. Padam Fane arrives in Faldara to kill guards, and it's the best moment in this episode. Under the throne, we learn that Agomar was hiding the Horn of Valir to be used at the last battle. Whoever sounds it will summon the greatest heroes from every age to fight alongside them. And Perrin, suffering from protagonist syndromes, says they should use it now. But then some random guy says, no, you have to give it to the dragon. Because one, it does make sense. One, the dragon isn't here. Two, why is the Horn of Valir under the throne and not at the Eye of the World? Why not just have the Dark One take it at the end of this episode and cause trouble? That would be some intense stakes right there. Go to Nynaeve and Egwene and Agomar's sister. The Trollocs are coming, and Egwene is scared that Rand failed. Agomar's sister is like, we're going to use the one power. I'm going to be in charge of this link. Please accept my friend request. And they just stand there while gyrating. Perrin uncovers the Horn of Valir and then sees Fane. He tells him to stop, then follows him. Dark One's still trying to tempt Rand in the dream, and then he envelops Rand in the one power, trying to convince Rand to open himself up to the power, confirming this show does not differentiate between Saidin and Saidar. In the waking world, the Dark One taunts Moraine, saying she doesn't know what Rand's going to be doing with the channeling. Is he strengthening his chains or gonna break them? So she presses the knife into Rand's throat, drawing blood. And then we go back to the channeling women as Agelmar's sister draws more of the power. And then Rand is still being tempted. And then the women are channeling as the Trollocs get close to them. Agelmar's sister uses the power to bring lightning down on the Trollocs. And then one of the women burns out. Then Rand uses the Sa Angreal to deny the temptation of the Satan and says that the Dark One is creating a fantasy. It wasn't the real Egwene. That's not the woman he loves. Then the symbol that they're all standing on cracks. Meanwhile, Perrin, while following Fane, gets startled by a bat and then hears a noise. He returns to the throne room to see that Fane and his Fade friends have killed everyone. Fane stabs Loyal right in front of Perrin. The women Algamar's sister are with are burning out one by one. She absorbs too much, and as she draws more, she feels at one with the world. Egwene falls to the ground. She's starting to burn out. And then Nynaeve moves to her and she's like, remember, to be a woman is to be always alone and never alone because that's meaningful right now. That is so deep. My God, that was what we needed now. Agelmar's sister cast a giant bolt of lightning down on the Trollocs, and she and Nynaeve burn out the same time, leaving Egwene the last one standing. And honestly, the most disappointing part of this moment is that Agelmar's sister doesn't just burn into nothingness. It would have tied in well with that story they told in the second episode about the Queen of Manetheren. That would have been pretty cool. You learn that Fane has the ruby hilted dagger because we never knew what happened with it. He probably just picked it up off the ground after everyone was gone because nobody put it in a box or anything like they did in the books. Because why would we do anything smart in this show? He talks about being a dark friend to Perrin and then talks about balance to the Force. And then we see that Matt has turned to the dark side and he's in Tarvalin. And then at the Eye of the World, Moraine says they can't go back to Faldara, and Rand says he's just leaving because he can feel the madness taking him. If Saidin and Saidar are the same thing, I really don't know why he's going mad, but whatever. He tells Moraine to say that he died at the Eye of the World, and then Padon Fane says that this is the beginning. Perrin picks up an axe, and Fane tells him that he turned to the dark side at the tiniest push. So Perrin just stands there and does absolutely nothing. Moraine stands at the Eye of the World as Land approaches, says Rand is gone, and then hints that she's been stilled. Perrin drops the axe and stares off into the distance. Egwene is crying, and she's so sad that Nynaeve is dead that it brings her back from the dead. Because that was the one rule we needed to break of the One Power in this show. We needed to make the One Power cure death. Not like in the books where it couldn't, you just have to have that happen. And then Rand walks the Blight alone in silence, and it's very meaningful. And then Moraine says that they're sitting on Quaindiar, and it cracked, and that's bad because that means the seal of the Dark One's prison is broken, and it's not the last battle. And then final cut to a beach. A girl is playing on the sand and notices boats in the distance. These are the Shanchan. There are women with gold bracelets known as Suldam and women with gold fetish gags in their mouth known as Damani. The Suldam command the Damani to bring forth a tidal wave that we know will crash into the child as it cuts to credits before we see it. The Wheel of Time Season 1 is an unmitigated disaster. While I understand some changes from the source material are necessary when adapting from book to screen, the changes made in this show don't accomplish this. In fact, they make the show worse. Inserting the mystery of who the Dragon Reborn is feels like it was done so that we can have those big moments that make anyone unfamiliar with the source material ask, is that the Dragon Reborn? Getting rid of Saidin and Saidar just destroys the magic system because now there's no reason for men to go mad when channeling, other than the force is female and men make it toxic. Aging up the characters does not make the show more mature, nor does making Rand and Egwene's relationship more intimate. Giving Perrin a wife did not make killing her emotionally impactful. The White Cloaks are now just cartoon villains. The characters split up after Shadar Logoth not because it makes the most sense in the show, but because that's what happened in the books. We turned the Gleeman into the Sadman so that we know the show is darker than the books. Moraine is injured in this series so that we can have her meet the Aes Sedai that captured Logain, just so we get a battle that makes us think Nynaeve might be the dragon if you didn't read the books. Everyone regrouping in Tar Valon instead of Caemlyn is a bold choice, but it wasn't thought through. Had it been, Matt would have been healed in the White Tower and we would have seen the dagger locked in a box because that would make the fact that Fane has it at the end of the season more impactful. The internal politics of the White Tower are now just reduced to underhanded cattiness. Ma Shin Shin is now a sinister truth sayer that's scared of shouting because we needed it to capture our protagonists to create tension, but we couldn't have our heroes Fusro Da Ma Shin Shin away if he was a malignant entity that plays with the entrails of those that cross its path. By far, the best vertical slice of what the show is the final moment we see of the season. The Shan Chan and their ships look amazing. We established that they're the bad guys by having them kill a small child off screen, but now the Iodom has been changed from a silver collar to a gold fetish gag. And that alone tells me that this show was not made by people that respect the work they're adapting. I'm dealing with people that want to break it. Thank you for reaching the end of the video. I hope you have a wonderful day. And this is the part where I say like, comment, and subscribe for the algorithms.